How much alcohol is too much and which is better for you? Well, it's a continually discussed question and researched by academics, and a study was recently released by the University of Adelaide with the lead author Samuel Tu from the University of Adelaide's Centre for Health Rhythm Disorders. At the commencement of National Stroke Week, raising awareness about stroke, something that could develop as a result of excessive consumption of alcohol, we spoke with Mr. Tu about his research and why they say that wine is better for you than beer. Samuel Tu from the University of Adelaide, thanks for speaking with us on the Flow Network.
Thanks so much, Ricky.
You have released a study, it was published quite recently, about the contrast between wine and alcohol and its health impacts. Can you give us some background into your division where you research and why you've released this study?
Yeah, sure. So we studied this heart condition called atrial fibrillation. It's one of the most common heart conditions we see in Australia, and it puts you at an increased risk of having a stroke. So what we were interested in was finding out ways we can prevent this disease from occurring. And what our research found was that consuming no alcohol, or a maximum of 6 standard drinks per week, may be associated with the lowest risk of developing atrial fibrillation. So that's less than 1 drink per day at a maximum. Now, interestingly, we also found that drinking beer might increase your risk of atrial fibrillation more than red or white wine. And overall, these findings tell us that cutting down alcohol consumption is the best thing to do for our heart health. We're not completely sure why we found these differences between beer and wine consumption. And definitely in other heart conditions, no beverages have been consistently shown safer than another. So I guess in the meantime, picking the safest drink for our health means choosing the one that we can drink the least of.
Sure. And so when it comes to research about these things, you seem to often see stories about this is better for you or that's better for you, what have you. Your research is completely independently funded. There's nothing coming from a particular alcohol industry supporting the research?
That is correct. This is from own private research funding, and we haven't been supported by industry.
Yeah, which is really important because people are often sceptical of when this sort of research comes out and go, well, that was probably funded by the wine industry, but 100% independent research, and we have wine grape growers and barley growers in our broadcast area, so we don't have skin in the game one way or the other, but that's your principal finding, is that wine has a lesser impact on that particular condition.
On this particular condition, yes. This is the first time this finding has been shown. And normally with these research findings, we like to confirm it in other populations as well. So the group that we particularly studied was this group of 500,000 volunteers in the United Kingdom who gratefully volunteered their health information and to be followed up over time. And we found that what you stated, those consuming moderate amounts of wine had a lower risk of developing atrial fibrillation compared to beer and cider drinkers. But this needs confirmation in other populations, for example, in Australia, in the US, in Asian countries as well.
Is that something you'll be looking to pursue, maybe getting some grant funding to look at the Australian population and get a closer to home analysis?
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting questions that this research raises. For example, the reasons why these differences might exist. So the current thinking in the research community is that there perhaps isn't so much a difference in the mechanism by which wine and beer act on the body. It's much more likely that wine drinkers in these research studies tend to have certain healthier habits. For example, they might eat a healthier diet, and that's why they have a lower risk of developing atrial fibrillation. So further research might involve really teasing out these details about how wine drinkers might be different from beer drinkers in general, of course.
Well, it's National Stroke Week this week, and we've been promoting just being aware of the risks and thanking people who support those who have a stroke. That condition you're describing, if you could repeat that again, and how does that link to the incidence of stroke?
Yeah, great question. So atrial fibrillation is a heart condition, and it's characterized by these irregular contractions in part of the heart. And this reduces the ability for the heart to pump blood effectively to the rest of the body. What it also does is it pulls blood and it increases the risks of clots forming. And we know one of the main reasons why strokes occur is that these clots go from the heart and clog up one of the arteries in the brain. So atrial fibrillation is quite a dangerous condition, not only because it can cause heart symptoms, but it can also cause these strokes from occurring, and it increases the risk of a stroke occurring quite significantly.
And so when it comes to your study, naturally it was mapping these British people and their intake of various types of alcohol, but is it sort of agnostic, if you like, on how much is a healthy amount of alcohol to drink, or do you advocate a position that's better to just reduce wherever possible if you're at risk of this condition?
Yeah, so again, we did study a British population, and even though their drinking habits are quite similar to Australians in the context of things, they still might differ in ways that we can't really predict. All we can say about this research is that we found this cutoff of about 6 standard drinks a week. In fact, the current Australian guidelines recommend consuming no more than 10 standard drinks per week. So this is actually lower than what's currently recommended, and in line with the current recommendations by the Heart Foundation, in that the lower your alcohol consumption, the safer it is for your heart.
Yep. Well, it's going to be interesting to keep tracking these sorts of findings, and I imagine our friends in the wine industry might be a little more positive about it than the beer industry. But as you say, research always goes underway, and then you bring out more findings. So look forward to finding out what else you discover in this area.
Great, Ricky. Thanks so much for having me. And it's great that your show is promoting health research. Thank you very much.